Anne Fitz-Gerald is the director of the Balsillie School of International Affairs in Toronto. Anne, good to see you. The fact that these talks are happening, organized talks, real talks in Saudi Arabia, is that good news, or do you already see this continuing to mean nothing, considering that both sides are still fighting on in the capital?
Well, I think that it is good news in a sense that it shows willingness to at least come together and discuss the issue of a temporary ceasefire, but it's not good in the sense that there is no willingness to discuss, certainly on the RSF side, a permanent ceasefire, permanent civilian government. There are no, as far as I know, civilian representatives at the table, which is effectively emboldening military leaders that have separate chains of command. If a temporary ceasefire is agreed upon, and this is terribly important for the delivery of humanitarian aid to a population that is running out of basic food supplies, water, electricity, and access to critical infrastructure, that will be a temporary solution only. What we need to discuss is a transition to democratic rule in the country, civilian leadership of a security sector, which is led by generals according to different chains of command at the moment, and some commitments of how this transition will not only happen, but be monitored.
You know, you look at this, it's 4 weeks now this has dragged on for, and you think a paramilitary group fighting the country's own military, how could it last that long? Is that just an indication of how heavily armed the RSF is?
Well, it's a very sizable force, and as tensions developed since the two parties were engaged in discussions amongst other groups to revive this plan for transition to a civilian-led government and to more democratic rule, they were the first signs of threats to the power structure. So clearly, both leaders, particularly the leader of the RSF, reacted to these early signs of threats to their power structure. And with a sizable force, there's all sorts of things that both sides can achieve at the moment to continue the military fighting. Some groups have spread out to strategic strongholds and critical road links and areas in the west of the country, areas in the city of Khartoum. We're seeing a combination of urban warfare continue and a lot of the soldiers and fighters fleeing into parts of the countryside. I think the concerning part is what happens to these insurgencies in their second phase. And when humanitarian aid is agreed and corridors are set up, these fighting forces that don't want to come to any agreement with each other need to sustain their fighters. So we've seen time and again in insurgency conflict that humanitarian aid gets looted and diverted to other groups. Another thing we've seen happen in insurgency warfare is that other armed groups that may not be active or which may need incentives to become active then get involved. Insurgency is all about delegitimizing your enemies and legitimizing your potential allies. So at the same time, both groups will be looking to achieve credibility with the international community at this vital time to gain status. General Hemedti is known as someone in Sudan that has command over a huge amount of resources and funding. And that's another thing that can keep the engine running. So with a sizable force and access to a lot of resources and cash and potential allies in the wider region, we shouldn't underestimate for how much longer the fighting will continue.
All right. Yeah, you know, this last coup happened 2 years ago. The transition to democracy seems like now a very long way off still. And you always make such good points. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks very much.